Ex-teachers, professors of Reddit, what was your this moment? When admin wouldn't let me take more than 4 days off after a close friend passed away unexpectedly. You're letting the kids down is a phrase I heard over and over again as I tried to reason with them. Story 2. Caught a student cheating, but stupid cheating. Cheated off of someone else with the wrong answers and the same wrong spelling. When I spoke to him regarding taking a new test, generous on my part considering it should have been a 0 per school policy, he refused and said I would be hearing from his parents. I, of course, did hear from them via my principal within an hour. Gotta love kids and their phones readily available. Fast forward to a meeting with the student, parents, and principal. I had his test and the one from which he cheated. Upon showing this to the parents, I fully expected them to understand and hold their son accountable. Nope. Instead, the parents demanded an apology from me for branding their son a cheater, which would negatively impact him for the rest of his life. And also, it's the least I could do since they were paying my salary. When I said I would not apologize for catching their son cheating the father, then said I was lucky I was a woman because otherwise he would punch me in the face. Nice. So, yeah, good times. Glad I got my master's degree for that. So admin ended the meeting at that moment. Shouldn't have gotten that far. Can't remember, this was over 10 years ago now, the student was taken out of my class. Everyone wins. New admin these days, super supportive of everyone. Holds teachers, parents, students, custodians, cafeteria workers, and everyone in between responsible. Parents still get a little crazy, but as a staff, we feel very much supported. Story 3. I caught a kid selling substances in the hallway and turned him in. He threatened to hit me. He was super unstable and volatile and had a criminal record, so I didn't doubt that he might try it. The principal refused to remove him from my class because he has the right to have an education. My other students took it upon themselves to escort me through the school in between classes and walk me to my car after school in a big huddle so Ice Pick Boy couldn't get to me. Damn that. Why I didn't contact the police? I actually did. We had police posts stationed in the school, but nothing happened because the kid's mom was a cop and she pulled strings to have the whole thing quashed. I didn't file a union grievance because it was almost the end of the school year. That crap takes time. And I decided to quit and move far, far away instead. Also, to everyone telling me I shouldn't have ratted on the kid and snitches get stitches, I get it. You're edgy. But it was literally my job to help these kids become functioning adults. And selling substances in front of your teacher is definitely an indication that you're heading down the wrong path. I actually could have lost my job if I didn't report him. No regrets. Story 4. End of year, assessing students to see who'd progressed through to the second year while assessing the work. The department head came in and said we had to fail X amount due to facilities and resources for the next year. He then returned an hour later and said that due to the budget, we actually needed to pass a higher number than originally thought. I completely ignored what he'd said and carried on marking on merit, but it was the proverbial straw. Story 5. I failed a college student who never came to class and missed both the midterm and final exams. The influential parents complained to the school. The administration later went into the digital records and changed the fail to a passing grade without my knowledge. I found it out later, third hand. Ergo, I refused to sign a second-year contract they offered to me. Story 6. A student had a mental breakdown in the library, smashed a wooden chair while screaming that he wanted us all to go away, and I got reamed out for not calling campus security before I called 911. Story 7. I had a student that copied off another kid during a test. I gave him a 0 present. The parents came in to complain to administration that since I hadn't explicitly said during the first day orientation that cheating wasn't allowed, it was an unfair punishment. Administration forced me to allow him an opportunity to retake the test. He never retook the test and the grade of 0 stood. Still, I was so disillusioned by the entire experience that I started looking the next day at college programs that I could use to transition away from public education. Story 8. The principal's niece made a B in my freshman geography class and she wanted me to bump it to an A because the child could not get into Texas. This school also pressured teachers to fail no students. There's a district in my area that my parents contemplated moving to at what point when we were younger due to it having such a stellar academic record and affordable houses. It came out about 15 years later that the students were pressured to not fail students. I had a manager who went through that school district and told me she shouldn't have graduated high school given how she never went to class. Story 9. I was a high school teacher with 7 years experience in my district and a master's degree. I was making $49,000. This was 2013. I was talking to a friend who was in from out of town. This friend had barely made it through his bachelor's degree, even with a lot of help from M and other friends. Over dinner, he was complaining about not getting a good enough raise, so he was only making $143,000 at his software consulting job. He didn't do the technical stuff, more customer relations. I left teaching to make more money. I am, but it has taken a while, and I really miss working with the kids. Wish I had stayed in teaching. Commenter? I actually know the inverse of this story. Know a guy who graduated with a bachelor's in genetics or something, a hard science degree basically. I also have a friend who cruised through college to get a degree in education. Rarely studied, and basically would be that one person who would always want to go and have fun on the weekends while the rest of us pulled hard study sessions every other day. Anywho, guy with the genetics degree worked his ass off. I remember him spending all-nighters near finals when things really got hectic, such as needing to study for finals and needing to complete complex assignments, and went off to work in a lab making $35,000 a year as a tech. He wants to move up and tells me the position right above him pays around $40,000 but requires he work there for 2 years. The teacher friend got a signing bonus right out of college with a middle school and is making near $60,000. She told us how that school pays a base salary of $50,000 to all teachers and gives bonuses depending on extra skills. She speaks Spanish. Story 10. Kid poured gasoline under the door of my room after hours and lit it, burning most of the room. The facility guys worked all weekend to clean it up and paint it, hauling in new desks to replace those burned. Not long after that, I found out I could make more money with less hassle by waiting tables at the beach. Plus, the beach has women in bikinis. I was gone a week later. Story 11. 2 weeks into my first year teaching 19th grade math, I had a girl attack another girl for no reason in my class. She was grabbing onto her hair really tightly, and I was trying to break it up. Another student tried to help me out, and somehow the instigating student managed to punch him in the face and give him a bloody nose while still holding on to the other student's hair. Now, what makes this story relevant is I literally said the words, "damn this," while trying to break up the fight. Not loud, not to a student, but just like, "Damn this, I'm not going to let this happen in my class right now." Well, the instigating student decided to tell the principal that I was cursing at her, despite the other students in the class supporting me and the fact that this student had a history of violence. I got a letter in my permanent file saying I had used inappropriate language towards a student. Damn that. Teaching taught me a lot, but I couldn't do it for more than a couple years. Really respect those that make it their career. Story 12. A female student I had disciplinary issues with accused me of hitting on her and making obscene gestures towards her. I'm an openly gay man, and most of the staff knew this yet. The district still put me on suspension while they investigated. They were able to prove she was lying, but the district decided that the best course of action was to transfer me to another school instead of, punishing the student. I quit at the end of the school year and got a job in banking. Story 13. I had a religion teacher in high school named Mr. Nguyen, who was working on becoming a Jesuit priest and was a really cool guy. There was a kid in my class who was an annoying smartass, but Mr. Nguyen was always really patient with him until one day he pushed him too far. I forgot exactly what the kid said, but it definitely crossed the line. Mr. Nguyen slammed his fists on his desk and shouted, "Why can't you ever shut the duck up?" He then picked up his stapler and chucked it at the kid, missing his head by a few inches and leaving a huge dent in the wall, and then stormed out into the hallway. There was another religion teacher down the hall who heard the commotion and talked to Mr. Nguyen in the hall for a while to calm him down. He didn't give up on teaching, but it was a pretty extreme damn this moment I witnessed. Story 14. Mine wasn't so much a bad damn this moment. I used to teach developmentally delayed kids, and it was awesome. The one moment that sticks out the most was when we were doing a lesson on dinosaurs. I don't remember exactly what it was about, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, the kids were having a blast pretending to be dinosaurs, so we just said damn the lesson and had dinosaur day. Pretty much the whole day was spent acting like dinosaurs and doing dinosaur things. Story 15. I was invited to apply for another job. There is this feeling among professors that though our jobs feel insufferably exhausting and stressful sometimes, that it is just the best possible job anyone could have, and we should be nothing but thankful that we have them. I guess that's what keeps us going through all the bullcrap. Recently, someone invited me to apply for a directorship at another institution, meaning I would move up several ranks and direct a research program and facility. When I was being told about the job, I was like, let me get this straight. I never have to teach again. All my research will be done with and by a large team of enthusiastic, well-paid, trained professionals rather than itinerant, underpaid grad students and postdocs that I have to recruit and train every year. I never have to write another grant, and you will pay me twice as much as I make now? This completely broke the spell. I realized that being a professor, on balance, is actually a horrible job in a lot of ways. I think it is just so hard to get a job in academia. We brainwash ourselves that it is the best thing ever to go through the whole, long, humiliating process. We know about these other jobs, but the buzz is that you are paid well and highly respected. But in turn, you sell your intellectual soul, so you should never want them. But it's just not true. There are some great jobs out there where you can still be a scholar, an even more productive and effective one in many cases, and not have to deal with the other crap. Commenter. My husband teaches high school. He actually makes decent money for where we live. On occasion, a college will try to recruit him because he does hold higher degrees. That is, until they get down the brass tacks of salary. They hope that the lure of academia will be worth the $20,000 per a year reduction in pay, not to mention the loss of a union, no hope of tenure anytime soon, and a reduction in benefits. While teaching high school has its drawbacks, like parent-teacher conferences, teaching college would be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Story 16. My mom retired as a special education teacher after a student bit her hard. She had to get a ton of tests for everything from hepatitis to freaking rabies. She was fine, thankfully, but that was when she decided that she'd had enough. She went on to sub for non-special ed kids and eventually to do administrative work at a charity for autism spectrum disorder individuals. Story 17. Was a student teacher. Had my degree, got my license. My heart wasn't in it after student teaching. Wasn't the kids. I mean, you just have to realize they're teenage idiots. I had 11th graders. It was the parents and the administration. The parents who refuse to raise their own kids. And the administration that doesn't back you up and holds you accountable for borderline unteachable kids. I remember two particular issues. First, all inclusion. It's the new movement away from special ed and toward having everyone in the same classroom. All kids don't belong in the same damn classroom. Some kids are brilliant at school and some aren't. It isn't their fault. It's damn reality. I had one girl who busted her ass in my class and couldn't manage better than a 60 average. I had to give her a curve due to the effort or fail her. She didn't deserve that. She needed to be in a lower level class. I had two kids who barely had a command of the English language. One was a girl who was brilliant. She was originally from North Korea, would have loved the backstory, but again, didn't communicate well and just couldn't cope. It's one thing to speak English well. It's another to understand nuances and so forth. History is a get to teach when someone's not proficient in English. Poor girl was pulling down 100 on tests in calculus and DS in my class. And I had another kid who somehow ended up here from French Guiana in South America. Apparently, it took them a while just to figure out what language he even spoke before deciding he could hack a college prep history class. Turned out about as well as you'd expect. Secondly, the aforementioned parents. There's a growing entitlement from parents that I don't understand. They don't get why their kids can't pass. Or get as, I don't know, show some interest outside of the day report cards come out. You only hear from these parents several times a year, and only to explain that little Billy barely turned in crap and failed several tests. Despite the fact that this is all online and readily accessible, my final straw was probably the parent who said point blank to myself and my mentor teacher that we were doing a terrible job raising her daughter. The administration follows up on these things to determine resolutions and doesn't listen to reason, because there always has to be a scapegoat that isn't them. I was pretty half-hearted about the whole endeavor after that. Did 2 interviews, got a couple callbacks, said damn it, and went into banking. Note that my experience relates to secondary education, and specifically high school. I believe that this approach may have better results in the primary grades. I would also put out there that if you have a kid who has, say, dyslexia, but has had years of assistance and management with this disability, inclusion is perfectly fine. I'm talking about the abhorrent practice of taking kids in situations who are, say, brand new ESL students or who have severe intellectual issues and just saying, oh, they'll do well. That's ridiculous. I'm also talking about students who have had a decade of results showing that they need basic level classes and sticking them in college prep or honors classes, often because mommy thinks her baby is super smart and can handle honors classes, and the administration won't push back and say no. Story 18. I was teaching middle school English while overseas in Europe when 2 students, a boy and a girl, began viciously fighting after the boy made comments about the girl's mother. For most people, this would be easy to break up, but as a 5 feet 5 inches manlet, both the 13-year-old kids had several inches and pounds on me. When I positioned myself in between them, they took a break from fighting each other to work as a team to push me over a desk. They then promptly resumed punching each other's lights out. I quit that week. Story 19? Was substituting at a low-income middle school for the day. About 40 students per class. Just had a simple worksheet for them to work on every hour rotation. Spent the day breaking up fistfights, chairs or desks being thrown across the room, students having screaming matches, students climbing and dancing on desks, students just leaving class during the chaos. I had 6 students turn in the completed worksheet for an entire day of class rotations. I realized I was no longer a teacher, but a prison guard with less benefits and no way to defend myself. I guarantee 80% of these kids will end up dead or in prison before the age of 25 years old. Never again. Story 20. When the principal told me one of my students' mother was getting her secondary education certification, so she could move up to teach a math teacher, where her son was. So they wouldn't be renewing my contract to teach the following year, but they were in need of a network administrator for the school district. And they were willing to pay me a teacher's $25,000 salary to do it. And I would be answering to each building principal like a janitor, not to the superintendent, like a district-level admin. Story 21. I was subbing for a class that integrated some of the special education students for 2 hours a day. We were having a holiday party, so the kids got to push their desks together and have snacks and watch a movie. I'm sitting at the desk grading papers when I hear the class getting kind of noisy. I ask what's going on, and someone mentions that Trevor doesn't like this part of the movie. Trevor is a 12-year-old boy on the autism spectrum. He's a very large boy, about 6 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds. I tell Trevor to come on over to my desk, and he does. He says he doesn't like when people sing in movies and starts covering his ears. I tell him I will fast forward this part, and he flips his crap. Apparently, he hates fast forwarding more than he hates singing in movies. He picks up a desk and whips it against the wall near a set of windows. Flips over every desk he can get his hand on, all while screaming like someone is attacking him. He's just trashing the room and starts going after the kids. I yell for one of the kids to run and get his main teacher and another to get the principal. Trevor pushes a few kids hard enough to make them fall down and then grabs a girl by throat. He has a look on his face of a madman, and he's sweating profusely and turning red while this girl is trying to fight him off. I get over there and am able to pry his hands off with the help of a few students. Trevor then turns to me and in a crazy, deep voice says, "I will find your house and hide under your bed until you come home. I will abuse and beat you and laugh while I'm doing it." His teacher came in and was able to pull him away, and Trevor just stared at me the entire way out, laughing like crazy. It was scary. Story 22. It was the time I was breaking up a fight between a 12-year-old boy and girl, and the boy turned around, punched Mai in the nuts as hard as he could. The school administrators did nothing. His mom was in the room with him. She did nothing. The general feeling was, this kid's mom pays tuition. Deal with it. I dealt with it by leaving the school, opening my own private school, and taking half the students with me. Story 23. When the prestigious high school I was working at focused on sports more than academics. On top of that, it turned out that the principal overrode teachers' marks if they tried giving students a failing grade. Damn that. Story 24. A mother and father were teachers. For mother, when a parent, dad, tried to punch her in the face because his son had to repeat the year. The kid was a disaster and put zero effort in class. Later, someone scratched her car, put stickers on it, and wrote slurs with liquid paper on the windows. She asked for anticipated retirement after this. For father, a male teacher, co-worker, told him they should fix their problems with punches outside. Father is no small, so he stood above him and told him, "Okay, let's go." The other suddenly did not want to keep going. In the same day, a mother came because his son was not doing as good as she considered fair and tried to seduce him. For both, not as teacher, but in a particular school. When a male coworker told father they should have a private party, and if you behave, mother's name dear, we will invite you. Father told him this was out of place and began to look for other schools to teach. For both, too much work, stress, and problems, too little pay and benefits, to the point they had to wait half an hour to talk when they came back home before interacting with anyone. Story 25. Oh boy, my time to shine. I taught at an inner-city school. I loved working there, and the kids were fantastic even though they had a rough in life. I felt like I was also making a difference in their lives. What caused me to say damn this? Several small things leading up to one glaring problem. Teacher in the classroom next to me was diabetic and in her late early 17th and still teaching. She would fall asleep in class quite often. If a student woke her up or asked to learn something, she would call them to her desk and pick up whatever she had nearby and hit them or beat them with the item. Sometimes it was a stapler, sometimes a book. It varied. We had a window between our two rooms, so I saw into her classroom quite often and witnessed this myself. I called in the said hitting of students to the principal. She told me to drop it. I called further up the chain. I was also told to drop it or face consequences. This older teacher had blackmail on pretty much everyone and a long-standing member of the teachers' union. They were all afraid of her. I was asked at one point to change my grades to bring up the scores for the school. When I refused, I found out they went in after I submitted them and raised everyone's grade. I had a number of fails, but suddenly everyone was passing my class. Again, I called up the chain to report it and asked to drop it. I was told that since I was new and didn't grow up in the city, I was teaching in that I just didn't understand how things worked around here. The union was incredibly powerful and was told they were trying to find dirt on me to blackmail me, and they couldn't find any, was told to wait. One day, I saw the said teacher next to me screaming, "Actually, get up from her desk for once. Start throwing things off her desk at the students." Some left bruises after the fact and physically hitting the students. I called it in finally. Principal refused to take action or stop it. I told her I would call the police the next time I witnessed it and would make a statement everyone was trying to cover it up and go to the news next. Was told I would regret saying that. I was asked to stay another year and commended for my teaching and for being a role model. I had signed on to teach summer school, which was also my income for the summer months as we only got paid for the months we teach. Some school districts will take your yearly salary and evenly divide it over the 12 months. Not this school district. I was on my own for the summer. A week before I was due to start, I had a full class roster and told my summer class was very popular. 3 days before I was called up and told my class was canceled due to no interest. What had happened was the teacher who beat her students and the union finally got their revenge and decided to show me who was boss. I decided that day I had enough. I walked into the school, quietly gathered up all my personal effects from the classroom, and dropped my keys off with the school secretary. I told her I was driving to the main building and quitting, and I was done. The school secretary told me she's seen all the good teachers go because of the bullying by this one teacher and the teachers' union. She wished me well. I went into the main building and filled out my paperwork. I was told I was the 6th teacher to quit just that day. I called up my parents that evening and asked if I could move back in with them while I looked for another job, even though I didn't want to. I did some substitute teaching work here and there while I was looking for a full-time job in a non-teaching profession, but I was done. I really loved teaching and working with the kids and making a difference in their lives. I have zero love for the teachers' unions. Story 26. I left during the first month into spring semester at a poor rural high school. It was my first year teaching, went from professional life to teaching through a state program. Absolutely no support from the administration. One class had over 30 students. Another had half the class as troublemakers who would not calm down, had a bomb threat, a gun found on a kid, a student death, and a teacher fired for an inappropriate relationship with a student all before Thanksgiving break. A quarter of the teaching staff was new. 2 people in my department had already left. Several teachers had already quit. And the interim principal and administration were refusing to help teachers with anything, and actually blamed us. I'm trying to hang on. I'm hating every day of my life, and I'm thinking that all I need to do is make it through 1 year and I can do something else. Then, early February, the principal calls me in and tells me that he thinks that I'm not a good fit, and at the end of the year, I will need to go to another school, or I will be terminated. In the real world, you don't tell someone you're fired but stay on for a few more months, and then expect them to stick around. I was out of there and thankful for it, although it hurt to abandon my fellow teachers and the students. Also, I had won Teacher of the Month during the fall semester, so I couldn't have been that bad. They had done this because I refused to fill out a slip of paper indicating if I would be staying on for next year. Story 27. I have 2. Early in my career, I had students who were plagiarizing lab reports. I turned them in, mostly because I felt I had to. The school made a huge damn deal about cheating and had an academic honesty pledge statement students wrote on every test. One set of parents screamed at me over the phone. Next thing I know, I had a meeting with the vice principal who said they didn't want the cheating to interfere with the students' future, and he ripped up all the plagiarism reports I wrote that year. My second time saying damn this was based on the cumulative effects of being unsupported by the school. They changed which courses I was teaching and the grade level. We had a construction project going on, so there was constant noise, including beeping and drilling, even when they promised it wouldn't be during the school day. That was a lie. Stupid school-wide initiatives. More pointless meetings, incompetent high-ups. It's the adults in the system that make it hard to be a teacher. The kids are generally not the problem. Story 28. I was a substitute teacher, working on becoming a real teacher. I was a regular sub for this class of 2nd grade kids, maybe 1st? Not sure really how to put this into words. I couldn't watch good kids get ruined by their parents. There were 4 or 5 kids I can think of, but I only remember 2 of their names, Isaac and Felix. Both of them were constantly in trouble. Felix because he didn't pay attention and drifted from one thing to the next, almost certainly an intellectual learning disability at play. And Isaac because he was constantly acting out for attention. Now, did I have to get on these kids 50 times over the same crap? Yes. Did they kind of drive me crazy? Damn yes. But they were good kids. Felix was the sweetest little boy. He distracted all the kids around him, but he distracted them by being nice to them. He'd just start chatting with them and seeing how they were and stuff. It was actually really endearing, but not helpful when little Billy is supposed to be doing his math, not talking. Isaac was less pleasant, but he was a smart kid. He did stupid crap because it made other kids laugh. He was a decent kid, and if I stopped him, took him aside and said, "Look, you know you can't act like this. What's your deal?" "I don't know." "Listen, I know you can be good and behave well. I've seen you do it. How about you behave yourself for me today, so I can tell your teacher how good you've been?" He'd brighten up and look happy, and for a few hours, he'd be as well behaved as I could ask for. Eventually, he'd do some new stupid thing, and I'd give him a look, and he'd kind of grin bashfully and stop. But every time I saw these kids, I had to start from scratch again. Their mothers were addicts, and I don't know if they had fathers in the picture at all. Felix, we were supposed to wait with the kids until their parents came and got them. On multiple occasions, Felix's mother was hours late. Hours. These kids get out at 2 p.m., and I'm there until 5 p.m. waiting for this lady who rolls up in pajamas with her hair crazy and no makeup on? What the duck have you been doing all day besides not taking care of your kid, Isaac? At least his mom came and got him on time, but as soon as she was with him, she would nitpick and peck at him about everything. Why are you smiling like that? No reason. Well, stop making stupid faces. What the damn lady? No wonder your kid acts like a terror in class. Over the course of a year, I watched them both get worse and worse. I couldn't do anything about it. Talked about them with the teacher. She felt the same way. Had made some formal complaints about the parents, but nothing came of it. After that, I couldn't do it. I work in higher education now, in a non-teaching position. I still watch people fail without being able to help them sometimes, but I can help them more directly now than I could have before. I couldn't watch that happen year after year with a new batch of kids each time. Damn that, it makes my heart ache. Story 29. The exact moment I decided that I wanted nothing to do with teaching anymore was when I was teaching a summer college class in differential equations while I was in graduate school. Most students are pretty checked out of mathematics by that point in their academic career, and summer classes were the worst for student ennui. The day before each test, we would go over topics and example problems that might be on the test. I told them that the questions on the test would be very similar to each and every example that I was giving. I actually gave them every problem on the test verbatim in that class. The students were also allowed an entire sheet of paper to use on the test. The average was 55 from 100. I gave them the answers to the test and practically told them so, and the average was still a failing grade. Screw teaching these ungrateful jits. Story 30. I worked at an elementary school as a paraprofessional. We had a 9-year-old psychopath. The day he was kicked out, pulled out by mom, was the best day of that year. The whole year in general sucked. We had 13 kids and only 2 head teachers, plus 2 paras, including myself. We had that psycho kid to deal with as well as several other highly behavioral kids. We had one of the head teachers leave on maternity and leave no plans. The other para quit unexpectedly. I was so stressed that I was losing weight and my hair. I was experiencing other health problems with my monthly cycle to the point that I almost passed out when my husband's grandmother passed away. I was given grief about asking for a day off for her funeral. We hired another para 3 months after the first one left. We had subs filling in, and she was just awful. Everything that went wrong I was blamed for. A kid threw a book at my back and caused a bruise on my spine. By the end of April, I turned in my 2-week notice. I felt no guilt. Story 31? Still a teacher here, but very nearly left the profession. During my early professional development year, which here in Northern Ireland is your first year of teaching, I was hired by a school with a really rough reputation. Started in September and was given some of the toughest classes in the school, which I thought was a valuable learning experience, even though it was really difficult. Principal called me into her office in November to tell me that she thought I was a terrible teacher and that she regretted ever hiring me. Direct quotes from her. Was given no constructive feedback or advice, then was thrown back into the classroom for the rest of the day. Had no choice but to stay there as teaching jobs here are so few and far between. But this situation repeated itself in March, with her then telling me that I'd never be a good teacher, and that I'd be doing the education system a favor if I quit and went back to working in the shop where I used to work. Also told me then that she had advertised my position and replaced me for the following school year without my prior knowledge, then avoided her until June when my classes sat their exams. GSE class got 100 percent. Other classes did remarkably well. She had the nerve to offer me a reference on my last day, so I told her she could shove it up her arse. In another school now and so much happier. Have support of an amazing principal who regularly checks in and is impressed with the work I'm doing with my classes. Glad I stuck with it. Story 32. When I looked at all the work I was doing to keep up, all the work that needed to be done that I brought home at night and weekends, and then at my pay. Story 33. I work and teach in higher ed. I still teach online and had a student a few semesters ago who did hardly any work but asked for an exemption from all the work she didn't do. I had to reply and confirm she was asking to get a passing grade for doing no work, because I thought I was just reading it wrong. There's an amazing amount of student entitlement that I didn't see 10 years ago. Sort of like, I pay for a passing grade in this course, instead of, I pay for access to college-level content. I think all the really great free resources online have changed the way they look at learning, and we haven't kept up. A bit off topic, but I've recently been spending time at my kid's elementary school setting him up with an IEP. Just working with the staff and watching how fast-paced it is really surprised me. I'd be in a meeting and suddenly a walkie would go off and they'd have to go out and handle a student issue and then come back to me. And that switching gears process is non-stop. And this might just be because I live in a relatively small town, but it seems like every teacher and staff member knows every kid's name and really seems to care. After spending years working with doctors trying to help my kid, it's the people at his school who've dramatically changed his and our life in just a few months. I know I couldn't do the work they do, and we will be forever indebted to them for their intervention. Story 34? Not sure if this qualifies, but I was an English teacher in China. I taught kindergarten, and the little emperor syndrome really is a thing. The little boys in the class were total craps. and the regular classroom teachers gave exactly 0 ducks in restraining them, though I saw a little girl get slapped for acting up. My breaking point was when I was in front of the class teaching, and one little boy was running around in a circle right in front of me. I was ignoring him, but then he started slapping me really hard in the legs every time he went past me. On about the 6th circle, he wound up his arm to slap me and I just beat him. The kid went flying, skidded across the floor looking pretty stunned, though didn't cry. Then, the teachers took it upon themselves to come over and give him crap, make him apologize, and sit back down. I left with 3 months still on my contract. No regrets. Story 35. Not a professor, but I imagine I witnessed that moment in one of my professors' lives. Had a kid in our linear algebra class that was off. Maybe autistic, not really sure, but clearly some sort of disability. The professor was a nice guy. It was obvious he was passionate about the topics he was teaching us. But occasionally he could be a real hard. Well, this kid would just say the dumbest crap all the time. The professor would ask a question and the kid would raise his hand, then go, 42? That wasn't an example. He would always say 42, despite it not being relevant to anything, or he would just say, for a minute straight, then never come up with an answer. Sometimes the kid wouldn't even raise his hand and just go straight into doing that. And he would sit on his phone all class with the volume on playing some crafty mobile game. Despite his disability, everyone in the class just really disliked this kid for that. He would do it almost every class period at least once or twice. The professor quickly got sick of his crap and started just telling him to stop talking, shut up, etc. After like the third, then one day the kid asked a legitimate question about something we were learning, which the professor seemed pretty surprised by considering the kid never says anything relevant. The professor starts talking about it and turns back to the blackboard to write. Then after talking for a bit, turns back and sees that kid on his phone again, not even listening. Oh man, that was an explosion. You're just going to ask me a question and go back on your damn phone? Are you damn kidding me? I'm so glad this semester is going to end in less than a month, so I never have to endure your company again. You are the absolute worst student I have ever had. Continued ranting on this kid for a minute straight. Kid shut up real quick and started saying things like, "I'm sorry I'm such an idiot. I'm so stupid," to try to get sympathy, and the professor just said, "Just shut up and stop talking or get out of my class now." Felt kind of bad for the kid because he clearly had some disability. But at the same time, he should have been in a separate special education class. He does the same crap in all of his classes, apparently. Still, my favorite professor I ever had, though. Story 36. My wife is a teacher. She started in the United Kingdom public sector, but left after 8 years. After a few months' break, she went into private education. There wasn't any one thing that led her to quit. It was working in a system that, over 8 years, saw 3 curriculum changes, 2 exam changes, and 3 changes to the inspection process. A system that demanded more and more from the staff while cutting funding and freezing pay, where she'd get to work at 7 a.m. and leave at 6 p.m., do some work at home, and spend almost every Sunday marking or planning or both, just to keep afloat. A system that was constantly narrowing its scope and becoming ever more inflexible, to the detriment of the children she was teaching, where her choice was either to teach her students to pass the exam, but deprive them of useful mathematical knowledge and critical thinking skills, or to teach them these skills, but run the risk of them doing poorly in their exams. This would jeopardize not only those kids, but future pupils as well, because poor exam results would bring the school's rating down, leaving it open to being taken over by an academy chain, which would be even worse. It was a system that took an enthusiastic and excellent teacher, ground her down, and stretched her so thin she basically had a breakdown and almost left teaching forever. Story 37. Second year teaching, my principal, first year in this role, age 30. And I had a disagreement about me using a microphone that the district supposedly spent a lot of money on. I taught art. It only got in the way. He didn't agree with my assessment and told me if I didn't use it, he would hold me insubordinate. I used it. He then spent the rest of the year coming into my classroom to observe me at least once a week and would look for reasons to write me up. He once wrote me up for my lesson plans. Not being on the desk, he expected them to be on when he walked in. In March, he informed me that I would not be rehired, and I didn't see him in my classroom again for the rest of the school year. I swore off the entire profession after that. I'm much happier as a nurse at a plasma clinic. Story 38. I was an adjunct at the bottom of the totem pole and got my class assignments last and only if the more senior people, everyone, had gotten their minimum number of classes. They'd hold off on this until the literal last minute, and I'd find out if I was teaching 3 days before the semester started. For the last 2 or 3 years, I was only teaching online and only in the summer. During that time, I moved away and started a business, so it was all fine with me. The last summer, I got 2 classes I'd never taught before, with about a month before they started. I had to learn a totally new subject for one, and remember stuff I hadn't looked at since grad school for the other. They almost took 1 class away from me after I'd busted my ass to prepare for it, because nobody else's classes were filling up. The other class had 6 people in it. I was told I could teach it prorated, and I refused. I didn't have time to learn that stuff, teach 2 classes, and keep my business going. Story 39. Took over 137 7th graders for language arts. Their previous teacher was fired because over 60% of them were below ACE average. No lesson plans, one 40-minute planning period a day, and a 22-minute lunch break. I worked my ass off to come up with lessons that would both engage the kids and teach them. Their grades and test scores bounced back pretty quickly, and the administration showed appreciation for about a month. Then the complaints. Asterisk mandatory parent meetings. If a student has a D or worse, I had to meet with parents. Then again, if it hadn't improved in 2 weeks. I inherited like 80 of these students. Wasn't grading fast enough. I had a buy next Monday rule and would often give them Fridays to catch up on reading, homework while I graded. I was told I can't grade during class, and the school policy was 2 days after due date. I told them I can only grade so fast and they only pay me for an hour after school. They told me teachers are expected to stay late to take care of responsibilities. Sudden leash tightening on my curriculum. Instead of Huck Finn and The Outsiders, I found short stories and graphic novels to get the material they could digest easier and actually engage for homework. Practice tests. Was told I didn't do enough, so I showed their improvement since I took over, and that it was thanks to them learning, not practicing multiple choice. By this time, the principal was fed up with me and said to do it or I was fired. I responded that she should go ahead and start looking for my replacement because I wasn't coming back next year. Story 40. Had a teaching license. Was working as a tutor and helping out in a classroom where several of the kids were openly playing on their cell phones. After class the first day, I asked the teacher how she would like me to help handle this problem. She shrugged and told me that she didn't do anything about it because we need to pick our battles. That was the day I decided that education just wasn't going to work for me long term. Story 41. I was in college to become a teacher for all of a single semester. I volunteered to tutor local high school students since everyone in the School of Education seemed to be of the opinion that it's a good idea to get actual teaching experience as soon as possible. And boy, were they right. The first day I go in, I'm paired up with a middle schooler who needs algebra help. Need to find X, solve for X kind of stuff, super basic. So I start explaining how you can treat both sides of an equation as expressions of a single number, which means that you can perform operations on both sides without invalidating the inequality, and he just stares at me saying nothing. So I kind of start working through a problem for him. Given the equation above, I would have said we could divide both sides by 3, but he didn't even seem to understand that. So at that point, I'm trying to work through division with this kid, but he didn't even seem to remember how long division works. The hour goes by and we haven't even begun to solve a single problem before he puts his stuff away and leaves. It was at that point I realized that I didn't have the patience to teach the kids who either don't want to learn or have fallen so far behind that they lack the fundamentals necessary to handle their current material. I understand that some kids have tough home lives and learning disabilities and such, but that doesn't make it any less frustrating to communicate with someone who just won't or can't try to learn. Story 42. I started teaching in 2008 when everything went to hell. I skipped student teaching and was hired as an intern, got fabulous reviews, was loved by the kids and admin, and found out mid-March I was being laid off with about 150 other teachers in the district. Got rehired 2 weeks into the next school year, even though they knew about the position for the entire summer, at a different school. Did great there, got their computer-based instruction class up and running while still teaching English, got laid off that March. It broke my heart and they once again offered me another different school that was an absolute hellhole. I left and worked other jobs for years, moved around, enjoyed my 20, met my now husband and came back to teaching. My old district happily hired me again and promptly laid me off again. Then hired me on a temporary contract, which was illegal, but my union was so worried about getting raises that year they didn't care or help. Finally got tenure in that district and ended up getting a job offer at a much better district and left. I've been teaching 7 years, and only one of those years I didn't have to completely take down my classroom at the end of the school year. Luckily, my new district does everything it can to not have to lay off, and I just got my tenure. Story 43. It only took me 18 months to wash out of teaching. The final straw was when the school decided they didn't want to hold back a student who had failed all of his classes the previous year. When I taught him for 6th grade, my first year, he was a huge troublemaker. The kind who discipline couldn't touch and who managed to rile up the entire class until they were practically unteachable. I mean, this kid did not give a crap about anything. There was even a rumor that he was escort his younger brother in the school bathroom, though no one could ever prove it. But he got held back after that year and was put into my class again. And he was really embarrassed that he didn't get to move on with his friends. He actually came to me that first day and said he really wanted to try to stay out of trouble that year and do well. For 2 weeks, he was a model student. He asked insightful questions, came to me for help with work, snapped at other kids who were acting up and interrupting class, and they listened. He was basically a different person, Then the school decided to bump him up to 7th grade with his friends after all. Overnight, he was back to being a little craphead and managed to turn the otherwise well-behaved 7th grade class I was teaching into pure chaos in about 2 days. I quit a few weeks later. Consequences were never enforced for the students. The administration wouldn't back us, and it just wasn't worth the stress and frustration anymore. Obviously, this student wasn't the only thing, but he was the final straw. Story 44. During my student teaching, I was at parent-teacher conferences. I was speaking to a parent whose son was failing, mostly because he did none of his homework. She was angry with me and pretty much told me it was my fault. She asked me why I wasn't making sure he did his homework. I said, "It is homework, meaning work you do at home. It is your responsibility to help him and make sure he does it." She complained about me to the teacher I was student teaching for. He warned me that teaching is very political and that parents can keep you from getting tenure or get you fired. Other teachers told me that this was the climate nowadays. Children are not held accountable and parents blame you for their lack of parenting skills. I decided that it was not worth it to finish the teaching program. So I finished early with a degree in history and poli-sci, the subjects I would have taught, history and a social studies RX. My degree is pretty much useless, but I still make more than a teacher does.
Story 45.
I'm a teacher in New York City, one of the better states, large cities to be a teacher in. My salary isn't glamorous, but it's livable. If I worked a normal 40-hour work week, I would make about $40 an hour. But I'm expected to be at school, teaching or somehow managing groups of children for 9 hours a day, and on average, I spend another 15 hours each week lesson planning or grading, even putting in 65 hours a week, and I know some who work a lot more. The job is designed to be impossible. Hear me, here in the United States, those that make educational laws are absolutely terrified of a meritocracy. They do not want most children to receive a quality education. So they give you an impossible number of children to teach and an impossible amount of curriculum to cover. Instead of working to make class sizes smaller, they demand that you spend your own time and money earning more and more degrees. The kids can feel that something is wrong, that they're being denied access to a good education, but they don't know how or where to focus that energy, and so they, and often their families, blame the teachers and take it out on us. Today is actually my last day teaching. I gave it my best for 6 years, and I just don't have another week in me. Honestly, I don't think my skill set is really geared toward teaching, but I've spent enough Saturdays writing lesson plans only to get called a git for trying to implement them. I wanted to be better, but I just can't anymore. Story 46. Not an ex-teacher yet, but it might be going there. I don't know if it was one particular moment, but this is really only my second real year of teaching. Technically third year, but one of those years was subbing with a couple of short leaves. My other 2 years are full year leave replacements. I'm getting burnout already. I get no respect from students. I have to constantly tell them to stop talking, do their work, etc. And some of them talk to me like I'm an annoying sibling instead of their teacher. Every day is a battle. To make them do their work, stop talking when I'm talking. Don't touch each other. Put down my globe, put down his backpack. Don't talk when you're taking a test. They don't give a crap about learning anything. They get and moan every second of the way. They act like learning about the earth is the worst goddamn thing imaginable, and that me teaching them about hurricanes and weather fronts is actively making their life worse. They'd rather just be a holes to each other and play Fortnite 24 hours on day instead of knowing anything. It's wearing me down, little by little every day. At first, I thought I had just gotten unlucky with bad classes. My first year was a crap show for quite a few reasons. But I'm in a new, better district, and it's still the same problems. How can I teach a group of people that don't give a crap about anything except for their own self-absorbed lives? So no real damn this moment, just more of a constant horror that gets worse with every passing day. Story 47. Might be an inevitable damn this in a week. I work with emotional behavioral sped kids in an elementary school. My one-to-one kid and I have grown a bond since I work with him for the whole school day, 5 days a week. We had a lockdown drill and he was hyperventilating and crying in the classroom in the minutes leading up to the announcement of the drill. The weight of the inevitable was just eating away at him. I spent nearly 45 minutes calming him down and keeping him quiet. Enter Jay, a real 4th grade a-hole. Bullies other students, talks back to teachers, is rude to everyone. His parents think he is an angel child and never discipline and blame the school. Well, Jay sees my student crying, walks right up to his face, and makes a crying boo-hoo face to mock him. Instinctively, I grabbed Jay by the sweater, pulled him into my face, and in the most stern voice told him to knock it off and get back to his seat. My student has a lot of anxiety issues, and seeing this student attack that made me snap. So now I have a meeting with the superintendent, sped director, and God knows who else. Meanwhile, Jay continues to go unpunished, and pretty sure his parents will get me fired. Parents ruin the teaching career. Story 48. My wife got contacted about applying for a job out of state. I encouraged her to do so. My thoughts were, I have a year and a half of teaching experience and a master's degree in teaching from an R1 research institution. This will be easy. It was not easy. I was told I could not teach in the subject, that I was fully certified and held a degree in my current state, despite reading stories about shortages and emergency certifications in my field, but I could probably make it work in another field if I took 7 classes. I now work another job that I don't really like, though I can get those 7 classes for mostly free if I want them. The problem is starting over as a teacher. Again, would be a decent-sized pay cut, and trying to convince myself to deal with the overall low societal respect for teachers is tough when the whole process has just exacerbated my depression for 3 years. Story 49. Not a teacher, but lamenting what I saw my professors go through. I have a bachelor's degree in craft and material studies. My goal had always been to attend graduate school and begin teaching in college afterwards. I'd say it's a sort of passion I found as an undergrad to teach people how to work with clay, but shortly after graduation, most of my professors started dropping like flies. Absolutely fed up with how the college was treating them. One teacher was promised a promotion, later it was given to another teacher that had richer friends, another teacher was given grief over her maternity leave, etc. Most were working multiple jobs to make ends meet, still had their own student loans to worry about, and were simply being treated like crap. And this is the top public art school in the country, treating their teachers this way? I don't know what I want to do with my life anymore because of seeing their struggles. It almost doesn't seem worth it, even with the passion I have. Most of my professors went above and beyond what was required of them. They were influential to who I am as an artist and person. And this was for many students, not just me. Yet they are treated so poorly, it's just not right. Story 50. I realized I hated 99% of my coworkers and disagreed with virtually every new initiative we were supposed to implement. Liked my time in the classroom with the students, but there's a lot more to teaching than that. Story 51. Taught for 6 years in low-income schools and a nice public school. Every day and in almost every class, I had to use Jedi mind tricks to redirect and confront blatantly disrespectful students. It was difficult to balance modeling appropriate responses to disrespect, but also being the alpha male adult in the classroom. I felt like my job was becoming more and more about managing behavior and keeping track of records than it was about teaching, learning, and those aha moments kids get. I was a really effective teacher, had good evaluations and good at behavior management, but still, not for me. My moment was realizing I was somewhat wound up before every class, every day not knowing what to expect, and that I was not giving my best time and energy to my family at home as a result. All of my energy was being spent on the kids. Also, it's becoming increasingly respectable to be blatantly disrespectful to others. Ironically, the same students are the most incapable to handle disrespect from others and the easiest to offend. Beyond the 4 walls of the classroom and into real life, they'd get their asses beat. Story 52. Obligatory, not me, but my so as a teacher. When my so was at an in-service day with other teachers, the topic was violence in the workplace. Pretty standard. Until one teacher with a broken leg came up to the front to talk and tell her story. That teacher had broken her leg earlier in the year, skiing or something, but she was still wearing a brace and using crutches while teaching kindergarten. One of her 5-year-old students got angry and said that he is going to jump on her leg and break it again. Seeing as it was a 5-year-old, she sent the kid to the office as kind of a timeout. Thought not much of it, just a kid, right? Well, after lunch, the teacher had her leg up on a footrest as she sat and read to the kids. This kindergarten student climbed on a nearby desk and proceeded to jump on the teacher's extended leg, breaking it again. This kid was in kindergarten, so messed up that this kid thought that this is normal actions when angry. I can't believe she's still teaching. Story 53. Working for an American public school is so frustrating. You can't get funding for anything. They expect so much for so little pay and in such little time. I was working on a small after-school venture into robotics. Just a few kids after school for a couple hours or so, basically just playing with mechanized Lego. I set it up that I could grade papers during the second half while the kids played. Supervisor told me I can't, because I'm not focusing on the kids, but because my hours were so tight, I didn't have other time to grade papers or make lesson plans or anything really. Everything you do is under the microscope, complicated and stressful. All for the same pay you get managing the produce section at your local grocery store. Something has to change. Teachers are patient by nature, but it's getting bad out there. I left the most stable adult job I've ever had with no other prospects, because I just couldn't deal with it anymore. Story 54. Not me, my roommate. She came back to the apartment, hysterically crying. She said she went to pick something up off the ground in class, and one of her students ran up, lifted her skirt, and forcefully dry humped her from the back while she was bent down. She fell forward, and then the kid ran out. This happened in a classroom of 40 students, all of them laughing at the top of their lungs. Story 55. My mom used to be an English teacher. One of her coworkers caught a couple of teens smoking in the bathroom. They beat up the teacher. He quit, and my mom decided to resign at the end of the year. The teacher that was beaten up is fine. He's a florist now. He provided the flowers for my wedding. Story 56. taught 8th grade math at a middle school in Denver. I caught 3 girls passing notes with very dirty, explicit lyrics and substances references. I called all 3 of their parents. The reason being, 2 of the girls were great students and falling in with the wrong crowd. The third was a good kid at heart, but stopped giving any ducks. I'd already previously talked to them, assigned detentions, talked to them again, to no avail. The next day, the principal told me to stop calling kids' parents. The girls told on me because they absolutely knew he'd take their side. He was more interested in being cool than disciplining and looking out for kids. The principal also gave me a talking to for not letting a student who cussed me out while screaming back into the class until the student sat down and talked to me. Story 57. I had a senior finish the semester with a 40-something average and about 60 pre's in attendance. He was going to fail his senior year. On the day I was to submit, grades administration came to me with the student and asked what he can do to pass. I said take the class again. Well, that was the wrong answer, apparently. I was forced to give him a few makeup assignments and a 70 to pass. He was such a troublemaker, they just wanted him out. Found out 3 other teachers had similar experiences with this student. Story 58. I'm a grad student fresh on the job market. Since I was in college, I dreamed of being a literature professor at a nice liberal arts school. The other day, I was talking to a postdoc at my school, and he mentioned he was excited to have his first on-campus interview for a tenure-track job. This guy had been postdocing at a world-renowned institution for 5 years, teaching 2 classes a quarter. Students love him, he publishes constantly, and he just got his first interview? That really made the situation click in my head. I know other people who apply to over 50 jobs a year, and that's not an exaggeration. I'm still putting out job apps here and there, but I've gotten a lot more diligent about pursuing my non-academic freelance career. Story 59. A girl hopped on my computer and erased the attendance for the day for whatever reason. When I wrote her a referral, she started stalking me around the room, crazy-eyed, making fists, ready to punch me. Even the other students in the class were scared she was about to jump me. I called security. Found out later that the girl, who was quite large and could probably cause some serious damage, was on substances. Administration didn't think that I needed to know. Story 60. Every term I have that moment just before finals. Up to about 5 students per term will come into my office and act all surprised that they're failing my class. They tell me they're graduating this term and I have to let them make up all the work they missed. I tell them no, then they freak out. But I need to graduate. I have a job lined up and everything. Then in was a bold damn move to miss half of the assignments, hardly come to class, and never ask for help despite failing every test. Story 61. For me, it was when a parent came up to me on parent-teacher night and asked me if my parents knew I was teaching. It was so uncomfortable, and he just walked away laughing with his buddies. That combined with kids who cussed me out and posted online about wanting to fade me, a football coach who threatened my coaching job. If I didn't pass as star quarterback and too little pay to put up with all of that, made me decide to leave after my first year of teaching. Now I'm in law school, and I couldn't be happier. Story 62. When I found kids labeled proficient were actually 1, 2, or 3 years behind. Advanced included average kids. Parents are not told the truth about student performance levels. This in a USA premier school system.